We are examining the integration of Makashid Sharia into employee health and safety systems, specifically within the renewable energy industry. Every year in Indonesia, thousands of fatal workplace accidents occur across the construction, mining, and energy sectors. The most jarring reality of these statistics is that the majority of these incidents are preventable. This chart highlights the central paradox. Accidents happen because K3 is reduced to mere regulatory compliance, a series of administrative checklists rather than true protection. Consequently, lives lost on site are classified as operational failures. Organizations rarely examine these deaths as failures of moral responsibility. Relying on external motivation, like avoiding fines, is insufficient. Systems fail when safety isn't internalized as a core value by the individual and the company. This slide shows the weakness in current systems. Strict regulations remain fragile on the ground if workers lack intrinsic motivation to follow them. The way we evaluate safety needs to change. Standard operating procedures shouldn't be judged through the lens of civil or criminal compliance alone. This diagram illustrates a different approach. In Islam, protecting human life is a divine trust, an amanah, a primary goal of Sharia. With this perspective, compliance changes. The goal isn't just avoiding a legal audit, it's fulfilling absolute accountability to the Creator. When the body is property entrusted by God, ignoring procedures carries heavy consequences. Technical negligence becomes a spiritual failure that betrays divine trust. These concepts were formulated by classical scholars like Imam al-Ghazali and As-Siyatabi. Their concept of hifz an-nafs, or the protection of the soul, places the urgency of physical safety on the same level as the protection of religion itself. The theological basis is explicit. Surah al-Baqarah, verse 195, prohibits throwing oneself into destruction, and Surah an-Nisa, verse 29, forbids harming oneself or others. Operationally, these are applied through the legal maxim la darara wa la dirar, do not harm yourself or others. In an industrial setting, this maxim sets a zero-tolerance boundary. Production targets and profit margins do not justify the sacrifice of worker safety. These pillars define the employment relationship. The bond between company and employee must be treated as more than a wage agreement. It is a spiritual relationship within an ecosystem of trust. The conclusion is absolute. From a Sharia perspective, organizational profit is invalid if it is achieved by knowingly compromising safety standards. This pentagon maps Makashid Sharia to K3. Hifz an-nafs governs physical safety. Hifz al-aql prevents fatigue with humane hours. Hifz al-mal requires insurance for accidents. Hifz an-nas demands protection from chemical exposure. Finally, Hifz ad-din ensures space and time for worship. This table compares the Sharia framework with the 1970 safety law and ISO 45001. They share operational goals. However, Islamic jurisprudence handles negligence differently, binding companies through ad-daman, or absolute liability, and RC, providing specific financial compensation for injuries. This Sharia lens does not discard modern management frameworks. Instead, it provides a transcendental motivation, encouraging workers to pursue safety to fulfill a divine duty rather than just meeting the requirements of a government auditor. Horizon Technology, a renewable energy firm, tested these concepts across 3 sectors with very different hazard profiles. The first site we will examine is a rooftop solar power plant, or PLTS. Risk projection installations. The hazard vectors here, marked in red on the left, include fatal falls from extreme heights and severe direct current electrical shocks. On the right, we see the Sharia intervention. Choosing not to wear a safety harness at those heights is an actionable betrayal of hifz and nafs, not just a procedural violation. Because life is a divine trust, rigorous electrical safety training transcends standard HR onboarding. It becomes an absolute religious mandate designed to preserve that trust. The stakes are even higher in biogas and biomass facilities. The cutaway dome highlights major hazard zones where massive methane explosions or highly toxic hydrogen sulfide gas leaks can occur. Applying the do no harm rule to this environment means hardware upgrades like automated gas sensors and advanced ventilation systems are not optional. They are legally mandatory under Sharia. And in a facility handling explosive and toxic gases, this mandate scales up. It forces the company to implement protections that extend beyond the fence line, ensuring the surrounding civilian population is entirely shielded from industrial harm. When analyzed through this framework, installing advanced safety hardware in extreme environments is recognized as a strict legal requirement, never an area for budget cuts. Our third case study focuses on water treatment facilities. The hazard vectors here, indicated on the left, are latent. Workers face continuous, long-term exposure to reactive chemicals and dangerous biological pathogens. The Sharia intervention, shown on the right, invokes the protection of lineage. Because toxic exposure can cause genetic mutations, the facility is strictly required to implement mandatory routine medical checkups and worker rotations. Perfect engineering and mandatory checkups are useless if the people inside ignore them. Advanced systems will fail without a rigid structure of mutual responsibility. This leads to the dual accountability contract. In the Sharia safety model, protecting life is a strictly bilateral, reciprocal obligation between the employer and the employee. On the left is the employer's mandate. Leadership holds the absolute obligation to fund safety infrastructure, design zero-hazard environments, and provide comprehensive training to every single worker. On the right is the employee's mandate. In return for a safe environment, the worker is obligated to utilize all provided protective equipment and strictly adhere to operating procedures, without exception. This establishes a heavy theological boundary. If a worker is fully trained and equipped, yet willfully ignores safety protocols, any resulting self-harm is categorized as a direct betrayal of the divine trust placed in their physical body. True industrial safety operates as a closed-loop ecosystem. Capital and labor must share equal, non-negotiable spiritual obligations to ensure everyone goes home alive. Translating these high-level theological concepts into daily corporate operations requires specific, actionable steps from HR leadership. This graphic outlines 3 critical interventions. The first step is spiritual integration. Routine safety briefings, like daily toolbox meetings, are elevated by starting with a prayer and a brief reminder of the divine mandate to protect life. The second step redefines safety KPIs. Instead of tracking safety purely through post-incident reports, an employee's strict adherence to safety protocols is used as a primary proactive metric for their overall performance and ethical standing. The third step honors faith through practical logistics. By guaranteeing clean, secure prayer facilities and flexible time for worship, even in remote or dangerous sites, the company proves it genuinely values the workers' spiritual well-being. Executing these steps moves safety compliance beyond its role as a punitive auditing tool, establishing it as a core component of the corporate culture. This entire paradigm culminates in a single defining concept: operational sin. Notice the central intersection of this diagram. When workplace safety is a divine trust, systemic negligence transcends administrative error. It is a severe moral failing that carries intense accountability before God, hablum min Allah, and society, hablum min nas. The bottom row of this matrix perfectly illustrates the contrast. While conventional frameworks hold organizations accountable to state regulators and industry inspectors, the Sharia perspective shifts the locus of accountability directly to the creator. Look at the conclusion at the bottom. The Sharia framework does not exist to replace positive state regulations or international ISO standards. Instead, it provides the missing intrinsic motivation. Effectively perfecting the soul of those safety operates on two axes of balance, a concept of dual accountability. For workers, the body is a divine trust. Refusing protective gear fails that care. Conversely, employers have a duty of leadership. Designing safe zones and providing continuous education are requirements for which they will be held accountable. This intersection reveals that systemic failure is a moral hazard. Focusing only on administrative checklists misses the point. Fatal accidents resulting from organizational negligence represent a failure of integrity. This roadmap guides the transition. Integration begins in daily operations, adding moral reminders to morning meetings. Management must then include safety as a spiritual metric, while site logistics support religious observance. Integrating Sharia values. The Sharia perspective integrates with these modern management systems. It functions alongside ISO standards rather than replacing them. The goal is to plant a soul, into every technical procedure. The first mechanism is the theological mandate. This roots occupational safety in the principle of hifz an-nafs, or the preservation of human life, which is a direct religious command. Under this mandate, securing a harness or filing a hazard report is framed as a sacred duty. By treating safety as a religious requirement, a worker's motivation shifts. The focus moves from avoiding a supervisor's reprimand to honoring the value of human life as a divine creation. This internal shift extends to team dynamics through the concept of amana, or spiritual trust. Viewing safety as amana generates an organic culture of internal accountability, difficult to reach through regulatory threats alone. For leadership, the framework introduces la darar, preventing harm. This frames safety budgets as necessary mitigations against operational cruelty, not optional costs. These principles aim to align both the worker and the executive under the same moral compass, reducing the reliance on constant external policing. Modern standards provide the necessary how of safety. The Sharia perspective adds a personal and consistent why. This visualization shows how the technical laws act as a structure, while intrinsic motivation fills the gaps and locks the framework in place. In this unified system, occupational health and safety moves beyond its role as a legal obligation managed by human resources. Following safety protocols becomes an act of daily worship, ibadah, and a direct moral responsibility for everyone on site. By adding a soul to safety protocols, the focus moves from protecting a company's bottom line to the consistent protection of human lives.